Stop waiting for permission to sit still. And finally breathe. At 72. I realized something that honestly embarrassed me. I had spent most of my life waiting for permission to rest. Not from my parents. Not from my employer. Not even from the people around me. From myself. I kept telling myself. Someday. Someday, when the bills were paid, I would slow down. Someday, when the house was finally fixed, I would rest. Someday, when the family problems were settled, I would breathe. But there was always something else. Another bill. Another responsibility. Another person who needed help. Another problem that couldn't wait. And so, I kept moving. For years, I treated my life like a house that was never finished. I walked from room to room, looking for something to repair. Something to organize. Something to worry about. Something that needed my attention. I thought peace was a reward. I thought you had to earn it. You worked hard. You solved your problems. You took care of everyone. And then, you were finally allowed to sit down. But life doesn't work that way. There will always be something unfinished. There will always be another problem waiting around the corner. Years ago, I remember sitting on the edge of my bed. It was late. My body was tired. But my mind wouldn't stop. I whispered to myself. If I can just get through this week, I'll finally rest. The week passed. Then another one came. And another. I kept making the same promise. Someday. I'll rest someday. Looking back now, I realize how dangerous that word can be. Someday. Because someday sounds like a real place. But sometimes, someday never comes. One afternoon, I was sitting on an old porch with a friend I had known for nearly 40 years. The sun was going down. The pavement was still warm from the afternoon heat. Neither of us was saying much. We weren't solving anything. We weren't making plans. We were simply sitting there. And suddenly, I looked around. And thought. Why did it take me 72 years to understand that this was enough? I had spent decades preparing to live, instead of simply living. That moment changed something in me. Because I finally understood. Peace doesn't arrive when your life becomes perfect. Life will never be perfect. There will always be something unfinished. A bill. A worry. An ache. A difficult person. An unanswered question. But you can still have peace. While those things exist, you can have problems. And still enjoy your morning coffee. You can have unanswered questions. And still watch the sunset. You can be worried about tomorrow. And still breathe today. Peace is not the absence of trouble. Peace is refusing to let trouble take every minute of your life. And once you understand that, you stop waiting for the perfect day. You start noticing the day you're already living. As I grew older, I started realizing how much of my life had been spent carrying things that were never mine to carry. Other people's opinions. Other people's expectations. Other people's disappointments. And especially, other people's timelines. When I was younger, I constantly compared my life to everyone around me. I looked at the neighbor's house. Someone else's career. Someone else's family. Someone else's success. And I wondered, why doesn't my life look like theirs? I thought everyone else had figured life out. And somehow, I had missed the instructions. But age teaches you something. Everyone is improvising. Even the people who look like they have everything together. The confident person has fears you never see. The successful person has regrets they never talk about. The happy couple has difficult nights behind closed doors. And the person you envy may be quietly wishing for the life you already have. You only see the outside of someone else's life. You don't see what they carry home with them. So stop comparing your garden to someone else's field. Your life doesn't have to look impressive to be meaningful. You don't need everyone to approve of you, to know that you lived well. There is another thing age teaches you. You begin to understand how many things you once thought were enormous weren't. The argument that kept you awake 20 years ago, you probably don't even remember now. The mistake at work that made you feel like your world was ending eventually became just another story. The opportunity you thought was your last chance at happiness wasn't. Life had another door waiting. Maybe not the door you expected, but another one. I wish I had understood that earlier. I spent too many years trying to control everything. I wanted every outcome to go my way. I wanted people to behave the way I thought they should. I wanted tomorrow to be predictable. But life doesn't make those promises. You can steer your life, but you cannot control the weather. You cannot control other people's decisions. You cannot control what happened yesterday. And you cannot guarantee what tomorrow will bring. Trying to control all of it will exhaust you. Sometimes wisdom isn't knowing how to fight harder. Sometimes wisdom is knowing when to stop fighting. There are battles that don't deserve your energy. There are arguments that don't deserve your voice. There are people who don't deserve access to your peace. And there are problems that can wait until tomorrow. You don't have to answer everything tonight. You don't have to fix everything tonight. Sometimes you simply need to put it down and breathe. There were things from my past that I carried for far too long. Old mistakes. Old conversations. Things I wish I had said. Things I wish I hadn't said. People I should have forgiven sooner. And choices I spent years questioning. I used to revisit one particular decision again and again. I would ask myself, what if I had chosen differently? What if I had been smarter? What if I had known then what I know now? But eventually, I understood something important. The person you were 30 years ago didn't have the wisdom you have today. You cannot judge yesterday's version of yourself using today's knowledge. Back then, you were doing the best you could with what you knew. Maybe you made mistakes. Of course you did. We all did. But you don't heal an old wound by opening it every morning. You heal by finally letting it close. Forgiveness doesn't change what happened. It changes how much of your future you allow the past to control. So if there is something you've been punishing yourself for, perhaps it's time to stop. You don't have to pretend it didn't hurt. You don't have to pretend it was okay. You simply have to stop carrying it everywhere. The past is already spent. Let it stay where it belongs. Behind you. For years, I also believed peace would arrive through some major change. Maybe I needed more money. Maybe I needed better health. Maybe I needed fewer responsibilities. Maybe I needed to move somewhere quiet. But one cold Tuesday morning, I learned something different. I was standing in my kitchen, holding a warm mug of tea. Sunlight was coming through the window and falling across the counter. Nothing had changed. The roof still needed attention. The mail was still late. My back still hurt. There were still things on my list. But for 3 minutes, I didn't care. I felt the warmth of the mug in my hands. I watched the sunlight move across the wall. I heard birds outside. And for those 3 minutes, I wasn't trying to fix my life. I was simply living it. That was when I understood. The small moments aren't interruptions to life. They are life. A warm cup of tea. A phone call from an old friend. The sound of rain. A child's laughter. The smell of fresh air. Sunlight on the kitchen floor. A quiet walk. A meal eaten slowly. These things seem small. Until you realize. They are the moments you will remember. We spend so much of our lives waiting for something big to happen, that we miss the small things happening right in front of us. And maybe that is one of the greatest lessons of getting older. You finally learn that ordinary moments were never ordinary at all.